So good morning, everyone. We have a lot of participants joining us. We're going to start in a minute. And I hope, we're going to get a lot of value out of this particular session. So good morning if you're in India, good evening if you're in another part of the world. So we're going to start today's session with a lot of information that I'm really excited about sharing. So without any further ado, let me kind of break down for you what we're going to cover today. At this stage, I'm assuming that a lot of the people who attend our webinar today are at the start of their MBA journey. They have a lot of opinions. They are, looking at information that's coming in from various sources. You're perhaps thinking about your career in, how you want your career to look over the next 3 to 5 years. And a lot of the information that we share with you today will give you hopefully, data points that you can think about as you now consider what is important, what is it that you need to look at. So let's first start by, giving you some background about us and what we do. So the Red Pen is an extremely experienced education consulting firm. We cover the gamut of consulting clients from the time that they're in high school to their undergraduate admissions. We help them with postgraduate admissions. We help them with MBA admissions. We even have, expertise in boarding and day school admissions, whether within India or globally. And we also support individuals with career counseling. Our record or our track record is, spans the last almost 12 years now, with admits to universities across the globe, across these service lines. And we're a member of global bodies of international consultants where, the emphasis is on providing ethical advice, providing individuals with advice that not only help them with the admissions process, but also give them a far more holistic perspective with what they want to do in their career and with education. So let's today talk about Team MBA. Team MBA supports individuals for global business programs, admissions to global business programs. We have a team of consultants that is really international and alums from the top MBA institutes worldwide. We support individuals not only with admissions, but we also support them in the scholarship process and, gaining scholarships to these highly competitive business schools. We also have an extremely successful rate of individuals who work with us gaining admission to their top choice of business school. And what it really boils down to is, our expertise and, what is it that we support individuals with through admissions processes. So, what I'd like to show you is just our track record of admissions over the last 2 years, which covers pretty much, the global top 15 or 20 business schools, yes, but we also support them with admissions to a lot of very niche business schools as well. Let me introduce myself. So my name is Natasha, and I head client servicing and content for MBA admission services at the Red Pen. So, when you work with us, I'm typically the person who will be, if not working with you directly, but, reviewing your material for your MBA applications to global business schools. What I want to talk to you today about is really the kind of questions or the kind of things that you need to be considering at this point in your journey. When you are looking at admission to a top-ranked global business program, you really need to understand where is your starting point. You'll start looking at rankings, you'll start speaking to or consulting mentors or alums of various business schools. But what you really need to understand is how do you structure your MBA admissions process? So how do you start thinking about the schools that are really a good fit for you? And it's important to realize that while rankings are a good starting point because it gives you a list of schools that you can research, it gives you a list of schools that you can start thinking about, you really need to first consider how you need to structure the application that you're creating for business school. And the starting point for that is to understand how admissions officers at top business programs evaluate your profile. At the end of the day, or at the base of everything that you send them, what they want to understand is your academic potential. How much are you going to benefit from an academically rigorous program that you're going to go through for a 1 year or a 2 year period that you're with them? The second thing they want to understand is the kind of work experience that you're going to bring to the class. How has your perspective been shaped with the unique experiences that you've gone through? How are you going to enrich classroom discussions? How are you going to add to the learning experience, the collective learning experience that your cohort will go through? They then want to understand your goals. How are you going to benefit from an MBA? How is it going to be a critical part of not only your journey in the next 3 to 4 years, but how is it going to also help you and your ambitions over a longer period? They then want to understand your demonstrated leadership. How do you think about impact? How have you already created impact in the work that you've done? And what does impact mean for you in the years post your MBA? They want to understand your extracurricular activities. Are you someone who puts yourself out there? Are you thinking only about your career? Or do you make the time to enrich either individuals, communities, or even follow a passion outside of work? There needs to be more to you than work. And that is also important to the business school when they evaluate you. At the top of the pyramid is fit. And this is something that we're going to talk about in detail today. Because when you look at a program, it's not enough for you to say that, listen, I want to apply to the best program that I can, but it's also for the program to look at you and understand how you are going to be fit for the programs, not only in terms of the academic rigor, but also in terms of the kind of school culture that they build. And how, schools also emphasize, or they would really like to understand whether your value system and your view of the world fits in with the program and the approach that they build. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today will help you understand or give you the data points to look at evaluating your fit for a program and making your engagement with a program before you send in an application far more meaningful. When you look at your MBA applications, you will have a timeline in mind. And I mentioned this because the research that you do for a school or the engagement that you have with a school before the application really needs to happen between now and perhaps June or July of this year. That is when you'll have opportunities to put in the most rigorous research. You will be in between, one of these stages that we've mentioned here. So either you've just taken your test or you're planning to take your test. You may be thinking about your goals, but it may not necessarily be, a very firmed up version of what you want to do. You may be looking at ways in which you can put your hand up at work for extra responsibilities. You may be expecting a promotion at this point in time. So it's important to know that a lot of this and, sometimes even intentional steps that you take will be a continuous process right up to the time that you submit your application. You will be conducting business school research. And I'd like to highlight that, business school research is never going to be over at any point during your applications process. You will keep fine tuning what is it that you want to know about business school throughout these next few months and, right up to the point that you submit your application. Engagement with schools is going to be ongoing, not only until the point that you submit your application, but even after that, you may have conversations that you want to continue having with the school. Your resume is something that you may update at this point in time, but trust me, your resume will keep evolving over, a 3-month period. It's a good idea to take stock of where your resume is at every 3 months, because you may have new projects, you may have outcomes that you want to update. So it's a good idea to create your resume at this point, but keep updating it every 3 months or so. You will storyboard and write essays, and that's, of course, a longer process. You will identify your recommenders and start developing your letter of recommendation strategy. It's a good idea to start early because you don't know timelines for other people or, people who may have their own priorities at this point. So it's a good idea to start early. You may start at a later point looking at subjective questions on the application form when forms are released. And of course, at a much later stage, you'll be preparing for interviews. So today, I think the stage that a lot of you will be at is that you're thinking about schools, you're thinking about your goals, and you're thinking about where do you start with your business school research. And the key point for that is, of course, identifying the schools that you want to think about applying to seriously. I think an important point to start with really is to think very deeply about why you need an MBA. Because at the end of the day, creating a very unique application, an application that highlights your strengths, is only possible when you understand what is the value that the MBA is going to add to your professional journey. I think it's an important point to remember that an MBA is not essential to build a successful career. So if you're investing the time and the effort into an MBA program, if you're taking time away from work over the next year or 2 years to really, devote yourself to transforming who you are professionally, it's really important for you to spend the time at this stage to think about the primary reasons why an MBA would make sense to you, and why investing that time and effort and finances into this degree is really paramount at this point. So there's 5 major reasons that I've put here, but whenever you talk about a school or you think about engaging with a school, these really need to be at the back of your mind. You need to understand the kind of direction that you want your career to take first and foremost. You need to sit and list down the different things that you want to do. What is the direction that your ambition points out to you that you are interested in? And that could be as simple as, at this point, your answer could be just, I want to have accelerated growth. But it's then the next thing that you need to start thinking about is, what form does that accelerated growth take for you? When you think about transitioning your career, in what way do you see yourself really charting a course professionally in the short term? And where, what in your experiences thus far would make you an ideal candidate for making those transitions? You need to think about personal development. An MBA will give you a plethora of resources. Unlike an undergrad degree where everyone, your entire cohort, will have pretty much the same broad experience, with an MBA, you have opportunities to really customize or to understand what is it that you want to do. So you need to think about aspects such as, do you want to develop your style of leadership? What kind of understanding of core business functions do you want to gain? What is the kind of sector knowledge or industry knowledge that you require in order to chart a course in that direction? So these are questions that you need to start thinking about more deeply. Think about the network, because a large part of doing an MBA is also the access to a very highly driven, ambitious, and inspirational cohort that you will be a part of, and the alum network. But at the end of the day, you need to think about what that network means for you. What will having access to those global connections or having insider access to people in a particular sector, what will that mean for you personally? Because what you don't want it to be is a line in an essay which just says, I will have access to a global network or an alumni network of 50,000, 65,000. That isn't sufficient to demonstrate how it's important to you. If you are thinking about entrepreneurship as your next stage, you need to really think about, going beyond the whole career development questions to understand the kind of strategic viewpoint that you want to build. What are the kind of problem solvings or the kind of degree to which you're going to deal with ambiguity in a new area of work and in a new responsibility altogether? Having an MBA will perhaps help you in a certain way, because you learn to structure certain approaches that you want to take to business. And you will also have exposure to, industry leaders. You'll have exposure to people who have devoted their lives to a particular sector, which might be really important to you. Finally, I think for all of us, you need to also think about what the return of investment is going to be. If you are planning to do an MBA, it is a significant investment. So you need to think about what is the 3-year or the 5-year vision that you have for yourself from a financial perspective. I think the next question that you need to really ask yourself is, what is the kind of shape of the program that will suit your needs? Primarily, you need to think about things like the duration of the program. You will have 1-year programs or 15-month programs. You will have 2-year programs. And the kind of time that you're going to spend away from work in these programs, you need to start thinking about what are the pros and cons of doing a 1-year program versus doing a 2-year program. Off the top of my head, I think maybe if you're thinking about a 1-year program, you might be at a stage in your career where spending time away from work might be difficult, and extended time away from work. You might not want to do that. A 1-year program would also mean that You may be compromising on things like internship opportunities. You may not have as many opportunities to network. However, if you are at an earlier stage in your career, if you're at, maybe have about 3 or 4 years under your belt right now, and you're thinking about an MBA, you might want to consider a 2-year program where you will have more exposure to networking opportunities. You'll have the ability to participate more fully in internships or projects. You will be able to spend more time networking. So, you really need to think about what is the engagement that you want to have with the business program and how much time do you want to invest in that. The next thing you need to think about is the format. Now, while a lot of us would first think of a regular MBA program or a full-time MBA program, you need to know that all the business schools in the top 15 or 20 business schools that you may be considering globally do have various formats of the program. And some might suit your needs more than others. If you are someone who is at a stage where you say that, listen, I want to spend my time the next 2 years fully invested, then you say, okay, full-time program works for me. But you may be at a stage of your career where you might want to look at a Gemba program, where you have maybe a quarterly engagement. You may want to look at part-time opportunities. You may want to look at weekend opportunities. And at this point in time, it's important to know that an investment of time needs to be a choice. And you need to work the MBA around your life and your personal needs. You then need to think about your career needs, because you need to then think about the priorities you have at this stage of your life. You may want to think about whether you want a general MBA. There's an executive MBA which is sponsored by your company, where you're going to be in the same geographical location as the program, will be better suited to your needs. You may want to think about a Gemba, which gives you more global access. And if your company perhaps does not sponsor your MBA, or you are not going to be in the same geographical location as where the school is, a Gemba will also give you opportunities to not be tied down by those needs at the stage of your career. You might want to also look at a specialized MBA, which gives you exposure to a particular sector, such as technology or even a healthcare, for example, or operations. So there will be niche programs that cater to those needs. So you should not kind of miss out on researching those programs, because there is an assumption that there is a particular school and there is a brand, and I'd like to go for that. At the end of the day, the brand is one part of it, but another thing is you need to look at the particular program formats, their durations, and your particular needs to find the program that suits you the best, which will also enable you to create the strongest application to that program. When you think about research, it always needs to start with reflection. I've spoken about the fact that you need to be in a position to create a strong application to an MBA program. So at the end of the day, when we talk about a strong application, it's not necessarily that I need to have a GMAT or a GRE score of a certain benchmark. It's not only about ensuring that your undergrad GPA is, what it needs to be. It's not only about saying that I want to go to the school and I want to create like very strong essays. I want to have like all my data points in line. It needs to go beyond that, because what will make your application the most authentic is when you reflect on why the MBA is really important to you. And the reflection that you do is what is going to be, what is going to be demonstrated in the essays that you write to the school and the depth of your engagement with the school, which is at the end of the day, that is what the programs are really looking for in their applicants. You need to think about what makes you unique. And this is a combination of factors. It is not only your personal background and things that shape the kind of perspective you have of the world, but it's also about the kind of academic experiences you've had. It's also about, the kind of professional experiences you've had, the projects you've worked on, the kind of impact you've created, and the lessons that you've learned from everything that you've participated in. That combination of factors is really what makes you unique. And you need to spend the time at this stage to really understand your personal background and what shapes your view of the world, your academic experiences and what you've learned from them, not only conceptually, but also how has it been a part of your personal development. And lastly, you need to reflect on your career milestones. You need to think about what you've learned at each stage of your career. You need to also focus on what your core values are. When you're applying to business school, it's not enough to just say that in 3 years' time, I see myself at an X level of leadership. You can, it's not enough to say that long term, I want to be at a CEO or a CXO level. When you create your application, what you need to think about is what is the core problem that I want to work on? What is the solution that I want to be a part of? And that needs to be shaped by what is important to you. You will only know what is important to you when you know what your core value system is, because that essentially is going to tell the school how motivated you are and how have all the actions across your personal, academic, and your professional life, how have they been reflective of that core value system. At TRP, what we make a lot of our clients go through at very early stages of their engagement with us is essentially a values reflection tool, because we ask people to go through a laundry list of values and really bring it down and force prioritize what are the values that really resonate with them. And doing an exercise like this at a very early stage of your MBA journey will also give you, it will also shape your perspective of what is important to you. And you will also look at those milestones across the three broad areas very, very differently, because you'll start understanding what your life has really been geared towards at every stage, rather than looking at, an isolated set of instances and then trying to make sense of it from the perspective of what the school wants to see. At the end of the day, it needs to come from yourself and then be reflected in everything that you do. At work and in personal life as well, you really need to think about what your leadership brand is all about. What do you prioritize? How do you approach situations? How do you negotiate with outcomes that you want to gain, both personally as well as professionally? How do you view individuals? Are you someone who prioritizes, a coaching mindset? Do you have a coaching mindset? Are you someone you believe that individuals need to be pushed out of their comfort zone in order for them to grow? But you need to really think about what stage you're at right now and how do you view leadership as a position, not only as a position, but also as a mindset. You then need to also think about, what problems you're trying to solve. It is important to know the problems that you're dealing with, not only on a particular project or in a particular sector, but, think beyond that and understand what are the problems that really interest you about, in a business. What are the problems that you feel are worth the time and investment? You need to then think about your decision making and your ability to deal with certain kinds of situations. If I were to tell you what kind of situations, you need to think about decisions where there is a lot of ambiguity. How do you deal with situations, or how do you make sense of work or professional situations where there's a lot of ambiguity, where there is no right or wrong, where you do not have a view of the kind of outcomes that you can deliver? How do you negotiate when you're faced with very difficult choices and you're not really sure about how you can deliver not only the best result at work, but also outcomes for people who may be important in your life? You need to think about also how you approach conflict. Now, conflict is an essential part of the workplace, but it's also an essential part of your life outside of work. What is your approach when trying to find a resolution? You may have strengths, you may have weaknesses, but it's important for you to make those distinctions between what are your strengths, what are your improvement areas, and that will fit into that larger question of what do you need to grow, and therefore why an MBA. I think the important thing to remember across all the things we've spoken about is you need to also think about not only what is important to you, the actions that you take, but also what are the outcomes that you are able to influence by the conscious choices that you make every day. Again, it's important to think of this in the context of your work, but also in your personal life. What are the outcomes that you influence, and not only for yourself, but also for people around you? So those could be individuals, so it could be friends, it could be communities. But you need to think about all these elements to make sense of why or how or what, an MBA is going to help you, and what is it that you need to understand about a program in order to ensure that it's speaking to each of the elements that you've reflected on. I'm now going to break down the research criteria, because once you've done the reflection on what is important to you, you need to then start looking at certain elements of particular schools. First, you need to think about the culture and the values of a school. And you can break that down into the location. Okay, you can break that down into the way the alumni network operates, the kind of involvement they have with applicants or with students. You can think about how the school puts a class together. How does the school prioritize diversity of a thought? You may have a school like LBS or INSEAD, which consider themselves truly diverse cohorts, where you have a majority of the class which is not from that base location. You may want to think about a class profile where individuals may come with a certain kind of number of years of experience, and a lot of this information is put out by the school. So you will have access to these data points. You need to also think about the kind of lifestyle that you will have while you're in the MBA program. Maybe you will be part of a big city, and the kind of networking opportunities or the kind of connections that you form with students and the location that you're in might be very different from being in a small town. So, and I think the first school that always comes to my mind is a school like Tuck, where the community is very close-knit, where there's a lot of emphasis on collaboration, not only within the cohort, but also with the town that the school is in. And a lot of these factors can be a huge motivator or a demotivator when you're considering a particular school. You may be someone who's not very comfortable living in a very, very cold place, and you may want to look at schools where you will be bringing your best self to the program. And that means not only mentally, but even, ensuring that your physical comfort with the region is important. You may want to also think about costs, because while it is good to have ambition, you also need to be in a situation where you're consciously aware of the kind of money that you're putting down, the kind of funding that you have access to at this point, whether personal loans, whether you're going to be reliant on scholarships. And you need to kind of understand how you will become eligible for certain kinds of scholarships or fellowships within the school. Like we mentioned earlier, duration of the program is really important. You need to think about all those considerations in terms of the transitions, whether you need an internship, whether the cost of being in a one-year program versus a two-year program works for you, and also the opportunity cost in terms of work, post MBA job opportunities, and whether that's aligned with your post MBA goals. When you think about a school, you also need to research the curriculum and the way in which the school approaches the entire MBA program. You need to think about whether you want to be in a school like Booth, where you will have more flexibility in terms of deciding how you want to structure your course, or do you want to go for a conventional program? Does the school focus on case studies? So is it like a Harvard, kind of format where the case study method is really at the base of everything, or even in European programs, a school like ESA? Or do you want to be in a school where there's a combination of case studies and lecture format? You also may want to think about things like what is the opportunities for you to have experiential learning experiences. Always, as an international applicant, you will want to think about the percentage of international students and whether international learning opportunities are going to be a part of what you do at the school. It's very easy for us to assume that, this should be the case in every global program, but you will be surprised that once you start getting down to brass tacks and researching programs, one might appeal to you more than another on all these elements. Employment reports should be top of mind. You do need to scrutinize those employment reports because it's important for you to understand whether those align with your goals. And, you need to also understand whether the network, and, I keep talking about the network, but it's really such an important part of, the experience of being at business school. You need to understand what that network means to students of the school. You need to understand what it's going to mean to you as you progress and as you start thinking about the kind of value that you're going to get even after you step out of campus and you start kind of working on your career goals. What you need to now think about is really the school research that you're planning to do. What does your action checklist look like? And, it's important because, so whenever I work with clients, I always tell them that you need to think about what is important to you, which is very broadly your personal ambitions and the kind of personal knowledge base that you want to build on. The sector or the industry specific knowledge that you want to build on and the resources that are going to get you there. You want to think about the community that you're going to be a part of for the next 1 or 2 years, and you need to think about the network. These four themes need to be an essential part of all the research that you do. So, you need to, at this point of time, think about the avenues where you're going to get information that will populate those four themes for you. Very broadly, first and the most easiest, way for you to engage with the school is to sign up for their social media accounts. All business programs will have YouTube accounts, they will have Instagram presence, they will have LinkedIn presence. You need to look at the kind of information that they're putting out. Their YouTube will be probably a mix of things which will be relevant to your application. You may have a lot of information on like a day in the life of a student, which is really important for you to know. They may give you essay advice. They may also be able to translate a lot of what is important to them as a culture or a value system onto their social media accounts. And this is really your first port of call because you will understand what it means to be a student at the school. Do not assume that if you are a student of X school, or an X ranked school, you're going to have a better experience as opposed to another school. It's really important for you to follow them on their social media accounts to see the kind of stories they're putting out, to see the kind of experiences they're putting out, and start thinking about what is really resonating with you about this information. And it's a good idea to make notes always. Start attending events. Schools have already started. I think Wharton has already started with their information sessions. HBS is already putting out webinar information for sector-specific webinars that they're doing. It's a good idea to start tracking, the virtual as well as the in-person events hosted by schools. In-person events might be slightly later in the year, but you need to understand that if it's an in-person event that's happening, say in India or say in another geography, these will be limited availability. There may be limited capacity for these. So always ensure that you sign up for updates on school websites and start keeping Google alerts for the specific schools that you start seeing yourself being interested in. If you have an opportunity, you should consider the possibility of taking a campus tour. This might be, an opportunity or an option that may not necessarily be available to you at this point. But if you can make it happen, there is nothing like walking through a campus and getting a sense of what it means to be there. Is it going to strengthen your application? Is it going to swing a decision in your favor? Schools are very, very clear that it will not. But it is important for you to get a sense of what you're really getting into. Read school publications, whether it is a harvest guide that you are going to apply to, whether Wharton puts out a lot of newsletters and research papers for you to have access to. It is important for you to read school publications because you will get a sense of what is important to them, what is important to their academic experiences, and what is the kind of resources that they're really devoting time and energy towards building. This will help you also create a far stronger pitch when you are engaging with schools. Track employment reports and other data points that schools put out. The employment reports are typically available at this juncture when you're planning to, start engaging with schools. So start downloading those, start going through those different parameters and understanding what about those interest you. Maybe you're interested in a field where you don't see too many people charting their post-MBA path. Does that necessarily make it a bad school for you? Perhaps not. But you will still want to go to a school and ask questions which will inform your perspective of whether that school is really the right school, given the kind of MBA path that you have, post-MBA path you have in mind. The most important part of researching a school is really conversations. And this is something that you need to start early, because if I look at, the people that we've mentioned here, students, alumni, faculty, admissions officers, each of them will be available at different points in the year. If you're thinking that you're going to get a lot of value by speaking to students maybe about a month before you actually put in your application, you may not be aware of the reality on the other side. We've had instances where, applicants are looking to speak to someone, but they are on an internship, they're traveling, they're on a global immersion program. It makes it very difficult for you to get a holistic perspective or engage with enough number of people to inform the kind of pitch that you're planning to make. So if you're starting your MBA journey now, start looking at things like student ambassadors on the website. Think about the kind of people that you're engaging with in those initial information events, and look to deepen your conversations with them. One of the bits of advice that I always give everyone who's speaking to any student or alum is, once you've had your conversation, and hopefully you have a 15 to 20-minute conversation, but you should be in a position to say, end your conversation with, is there anyone else that you can point me in the direction of? Is there anyone that you recommend I speak to? Start deepening your network at an early stage of the conversation. Start having people who are invested in your journey with the school and who see themselves as excited to have you as someone that they would see on campus. Once you have locked down on the kind of things that you want to find out about a school, whether those are data points, the experience you're planning to have, or the kind of career path that you're planning to chart, you need to then start thinking about the questions that you want to ask the students and the alumni, who are probably your richest sources of information about the larger experience of being on campus. What you don't want to ask them, I'll make that very clear first. What you don't want to ask them is, what did you say in order to get into this particular school? What you instead need to ask them about is really the experience of what it means to be on campus. Because there, they would have gone through the same journey as you. Being on campus would give them a very, very different perspective of what it means to be a student. So you need to think about the 4 tabs that I've mentioned over here. You need to ask them about the kind of courses that they've really enjoyed. What has been inspiring people that they've met on campus? What are things that they wish they had known about before they actually stepped onto the campus? They also will be able to tell you a lot about the experience of being a part of a community. So you can ask them things about, like, what are the courses or the clubs that they wish they had known about before they joined? What are the experiences they've had that have really helped them grow as individuals, as future business leaders? What has surprised them about the school in a positive way? What did they think would not necessarily be the biggest part of their experience, but has, surprised them and been the reason why they love the school so much? And it's important to understand what that means, both in the classroom from an academic perspective or from a networking perspective, but more importantly, in terms of just them being engaged and having a positive experience on campus. Don't only focus on what is it that they take away, but also think about asking them questions around what have been the areas in which they've contributed towards the student community. How have they been engaged community citizens? When you look about gaining perspective from all these questions, I think one part of that is also to articulate or ask a question about their advice to you, to advise to someone who's applying to the school. And that would be 2 ways, right? So one would be knowing the school the way they do. What is the advice that they would give someone? The second is, hopefully, if you've been able to have a brief pitch that you've been able to give them about who you are and what matters to you. And that is why we kind of spoke about that at the start, right? That those are the first reflections that you need to have. But when you create that pitch about who you are, what matters to you, and what is it that you're planning to gain from this program, what is the advice that they would give to you? You need to think about asking them questions in terms of also, how do they see the ideal student on campus? Who would benefit the most from the particular kind of learning environment that they are in? And asking those questions will also give you a sense of whether that really aligns with the kind of experience you want to gain from an MBA program. And finally, I'm going to talk about this again, is networking. We see a lot of applications where the first draft of the application will be, why do you want to come to our school? There will be something on the lines of, I will have access to the network. So now is the time when you really deepen what it means to be a part of that network. How has the network been an integral part of the kind of connections, industry connections they have formed? How is, if you're speaking to an alum especially, you may want to check whether those have been beneficial for them, even when they're on the career path that they're in terms of gaining mentors, in terms of opportunities, gaining opportunities, not only for job opportunities, but also on projects. Has the, network been an important part of like broadening their worldview and their perspective just by deepening connections with people from a particular sector across the world? You also need to understand what are the alumni benefits at the school. So at CBS, if you're a CBS alum, you will have access to classes. You will have the opportunity to audit classes. You will be someone who they would want to see as a continuous learner. Similarly, every school will have their own perspective on the kind of benefits that they offer alums. And it's important for you to get an understanding of whether those are benefits that really interest you and whether they're going to have long-term value for you. Because all of this will go towards you creating a pitch that really makes sense for the school. I think I'm going to talk about a couple of general guidelines. When you talk about your fit with the school, everything that we've discussed so far will help you define for you what school best matches your priorities in terms of what you want to gain in a post-MBA career. And what you want to gain needs to go beyond rankings. Rankings, like I said, are a good place for you to start your research, but your research should not end once you know the rankings and then you're kind of looking at applications. Once you know rankings, you can then start looking at deepening your connections with the school and understanding the kind of resources they offer. The second important guideline that I'm going to give you is start documenting your research. At the TRP, what we always emphasize is we have research templates, right? And those school research templates are really critical because what you don't want to do is rely on your memory. Don't rely on your memory for details about the kind of people that you've spoken to, their graduating class, the information they've shared, resources they've shared. It's important for you to start maintaining detailed notes. So whether you do this on a spreadsheet, whether you do this on a document, whether you're using a software for it or a program for it, ensure that everything that you do around your MBA research is in a singular place, whether it's reflection or whether it's school-specific information. Update your LinkedIn profile. I cannot emphasize how important this is. Your LinkedIn profile needs to give someone who you've connected with, even for a conversation, a very accurate picture of where you are in your career, what is the kind of evolution you've seen so far, what is important to you, because those will be important factors when they decide to have a conversation with you. If you are someone who has zero LinkedIn presence and you start connecting or sending emails to people over LinkedIn because you want to connect with them, you want to gain more information, you will be less likely to receive a response if there is no information that they can gain about you before they decide whether they want to commit the time and invest the time in having a conversation. So please update your LinkedIn profile. If possible, have an outline of your resume ready as well, because in case you are engaging with faculty or you attend events and you want to ask follow-up questions, you need to have a resume that you can share with individuals, and that pretty much serves the same purpose. Practice your pitch. Your pitch is essentially, why do you need an MBA and why are you considering X school? Okay. Once you create your pitch, you really understand how deep your understanding of why an MBA is important to you. Because if your MBA pitch kind of starts sounding like, I want to be at X level in these many years, and I want to be at X school because it's really the best, you know that that is not a pitch which is going to appeal to someone who needs to have a conversation with you. You need to think about deeper questions, like in line with the reflection that we've spoken about. But you need to think about what is important to you. What are the problems you want to solve going forward? What is the involvement you want to have with solutioning for certain business problems? You need to think about the path that you want to be on, whether that is in a particular sector or whether it's an entrepreneurial path. And you need to be able to think about how you feel an MBA journey might help you. When you are authentic in this kind of pitch, you will find people willing to have longer conversations, willing to put themselves out more to build your perspective on how this particular school will be of value to you. Learn about admissions officers. Understand how they view the admissions process. When you get to know admissions officers, when you start attending their events, start following them on LinkedIn. A lot of them put out very valuable information about things like school research, important milestones in the school's history, new centers of excellence that the schools are establishing. A lot of this information can be very valuable to you when you're considering what program is best for you. I think another important thing is to really have a long list and a short list. At this stage, start thinking about making a long list, which is maybe about 10 schools, and then start researching those 10 schools. In a month or two, you will get to a point where you have enough information based on attending events, speaking to individuals, and really doing a bit of initial engagement on social media to be able to bring that list of 10 schools down to a list of 5 schools. Those 5 schools should ideally be a combination of some dream schools where you feel, you know what, no matter what the outcome is, I just want to apply to these schools because they really appeal to me. The second set of schools will be your target schools where you know the admissions process is highly competitive, but you have most of your data points or your sector experience or your path so far seems to align more with the school that you're applying to. The third will be safety schools where you know that they will view your application extremely favorably. And always try and have a short list of 5 schools that covers these bases. The last thing, and this pretty much will span all the points that we've spoken about right now, is really to be authentic in your approach. Don't try and curate a personality that you think is going to appeal to a particular school, but be authentic in terms of what matters to you and why you're thinking about this journey at this stage of your life. It is okay to sound, maybe a little uninformed at this stage, because what you want to do is keep refining your pitch, keep refining why a school is important to you. So be authentic in what you seek to gain, and you will find a lot more people are invested in you and will see that authenticity as a good sign in terms of how you're going to fit into the school. I know that a lot of what we've shared thus far might speak to some parts of where you think you are. So I feel another thing that we should focus on right now is understanding if you have any questions that you'd like to ask us. So you can type your questions into the Q&A box right now, and we can answer them. If we are running out of time and post this conversation as well, we can look at you reaching out to us. Maybe you want some time to think about what we've spoken about so far, and you want to engage with us through, longer term. You'd want to engage with us through the counseling process. You can say there are 2 ways for you to engage with us. You can look at sending us an email if you want to perhaps have maybe you have maybe broader questions and you're not really sure how we can help you. At that point, you can drop us an email. You can also reach out to us if you have if you're at a stage in your research process where you say, listen, I've done a lot right now, and what I want to do is just, have a more specific conversation. Feel free to reach out to us. Our email address and the contact number is both written over here. I think someone has asked what consulting services do we provide. So for an MBA applicant, and I'm assuming this is for an MBA application, but for an MBA application, the Red Pen really covers the end-to-end application. So we will provide you with help across all elements of your MBA application, whether it is, the application form, the letters of recommendation, your resume, the essays that you plan to write for your application. So the consulting services that we provide for an MBA process will really cover the entire scope of your application. So I hope that answers your question. You can always reach out to us if you want some specific information, to your particular journey. Is IELTS compulsory for any business school? Oh, this is a great question. Yes, the IELTS can be compulsory for a certain set of schools. It is always important for you to check some of these details before you apply. So if you're planning to apply to schools like UCLA Anderson or Berkeley Haas, then you will have an English assessment score, which is required. Most of the UC schools will require it. There are other schools where we have seen that certain applicants have been asked, though they have done their undergrad in English, they have been asked to provide an additional English language score. So it is important to check school websites whether that is a primary requirement. Another thing that you also need to check with schools, and I'll just put this out there because it comes to mind, is you need to check if you have a 15-year undergrad degree, whether the school will accept that or do they have any additional requirements for you to fulfill. So if you have, for example, a 15-year undergrad plus a CA, they may not have that requirement, but you are someone who's done a 15-year and a master's, you may still pass that. But for other schools, they do mention that they evaluate unconventional applications like years of undergrad experience on a case-by-case basis. So if you're starting out early, now is a good time to really ask these questions to school and find out, what is applicable to you. What is best for me? Work at 6 years in business excellence, digital transformation, Indian versus foreign. So, honestly, there is no best answer for this, Gaurav. what I would really recommend is don't only think about the work profile that you have, but the industry that you've been a part of. So if you've been in business excellence and digital transformation, you need to also think about the sector that you're aligned with, whether this is financial services, whether this is insurance, whether this is, for any other kind of sector. And then think about what are the larger business levers that you want to have access to. Given the role that you're in, it might be worthwhile for you to really think about larger business problems you have exposure to and the kind of role that you want to play in solving them. It's a good idea for you to start off with looking at rankings and having conversations with schools. You might find that a general management course suits your purpose. You might find that you want exposure to maybe sector specific, a career path in the future. But it will be important for you to engage with schools like, again, just randomly, I'm going to say this, but if you're thinking of an Indian MBA, engage with a school like ISB, find out the kind of resources, because now is a time when they'll really be able to invest a little more in a conversation with you. I think around May onwards will also be a good time to have that conversation. If you're thinking of a foreign MBA, I would say look at both European as well as US schools. Don't limit yourself to only European or only US schools. But again, have a conversation where you've reflected on the sector that you want to be a part of. And again, if you're looking at maybe digital transformation being the future that you want to build on, you may want to think about what shape and form you want that to have. So in your case, I would say have a little more reflection on the path that you want to chart before you start talking to schools, but don't limit yourself to an Indian versus foreign. At this point, have a conversation with both and look at the resources that the school will really be able to provide you on this journey before you take that call. Okay, we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to see how much we can go through. Thanks, Pushkar, for your comment. I'm going to now look at the next question. Harsh, I have 32 months of work ex in finance domain after undergrad. Is this enough? It is enough to apply to business schools, Harsh. One of the FAQs that schools will always put up on their website is whether they have a specific minimum experience. And when you're calculating your experience, look at the time from when you started working till the time that you're going to submit your application. If you have 32 months of work ex, that is you're in the, you're really an ideal candidate to think about an MBA at this point. But what will be important in your stage is of life or career is to really think about the kind of exposure that will be important to you in the next 5 years of your career. Someone else has asked this question. I have more than 10 years of experience in IT. Could you let me know which schools you should target? I think at this point, if you have around 10 years, I might ask you at this stage to consider researching European programs a little more aggressively. You might find that the cohort has a lot more, they come to the program with a lot more work experience. You may want to think about, of course, basis the kind of goals that you've set for yourself. But, a program like IMD, where a minimum work experience of 9 is almost, the norm, might be a good program for you. A lot of European programs do value applicants with a significant amount of work experience. So I would prioritize that. If you want a more specific answer, you can always reach out to us, but this is a good starting point for you. How do you decide if you want to go for an MBA or a specialized master's? I'm confused. I don't know whether you want to specialize in a particular area and you're looking for a course for career growth plus better work plus financial progression. Now, these are natural ambitions, but I would say what you need to think about is, if you are at a stage in your career where there are two ways typically where you can grow. Either you think about becoming a subject matter expert and really, leadership then becomes a secondary factor because you want to deepen your knowledge and really gain more expertise in a particular field. So subject matter expertise becomes a priority. The second priority is that you want to accelerate the pace of vertical growth and you want to see yourself being a bigger influencer in strategic decision making, not only for your area of expertise, but for larger business levers that would impact not only the organization that you plan to be a part of, but perhaps if you have an entrepreneurial goal in the future. So I think when you think about whether you want to go for an MBA or a specialized master's, and by the way, this is a service that we do offer for individuals where, if someone is confused about whether they want to go for an MBA or a master's, we do have a detailed counseling session that we do, which will give them enough data points. But very broadly at this stage, what I would say is, think about whether deepening your knowledge of the subject that you are interested in is a priority, or is growing vertically and gaining leadership exposure and a broader understanding of business levers a priority? I think that needs to be the base of where you start thinking about this journey. What percentage of applicants that the Red Pen has consulted made it to M7 or their dream school? Some stats around success stories. So we, very interestingly, we do have a website where we put out a lot of these success stories. We have a very active presence on YouTube where a lot of the applicants who have worked with us for M7 schools, do come on to these sessions and really talk about it. In fact, in April, we're putting out a session which is with individuals, past clients of ours who have really been a part of, the top business schools in the world. We'll get them together and have a panel, and you should attend that. But our expertise is in M7 schools and application to M7 schools as well. So, you can always reach out to us and we can answer this question for you. I left my job to pursue my business. I'm not highly profitable at the moment, but does that count as work experience? Yes, it does. Business schools are not going to look at the kind of profit you're posting to judge whether you are a good candidate for them or not. What matters is the depth with which you have really committed yourself to a particular course or a course of action professionally. And the scale of your business is not the deciding factor of whether you are a good candidate for business school. I think, Pratik, what you really need to think about is a course of action that you want to pursue in the future. And, think about your entrepreneurial journey in terms of the milestones you want to achieve. It will be important for you to start positioning that when you have conversations with individuals, because it's not, like I said, it's not about profitability, but it's about the course of action or the passion or the larger questions that you want to answer. Putting yourself out there and starting a business is a good indicator for schools that you're ready to put your money where your mouth is. So I don't think you should be discouraged, and you should definitely start researching if that is the way that you want to go. Do B schools have a GMAT or a GRE preference? Keshav, they don't. You can, I would suggest try both formats, try mock tests on both formats, go with a test that really speaks to you. Because some individuals have strengths that are reflected better on the GRE versus the GMAT, but for the schools, they are not going to distinguish between someone who has given one test over the other. So please go with what suits your particular test taking abilities. Do you think INSEAD is I'm assuming this is INSEAD. Do you think INSEAD is a good school? And would I be able to get into INSEAD, IMD, LBS, Cambridge, HEC, Cornell, Kellogg? So honestly, I would need more data points in order to make that call, because with 10 years, more than 10 years experience, checked and found average, I don't think you need to feel whether, checking the website is one thing when they talk about average age, but you need to remember that the average age is merely an average. And it is also informed by individuals who are at the higher end of work experience. You need to have conversations with schools. You will be surprised with schools, especially even the schools that you mentioned on your list, are very open about having conversations around how you would add value to the class. You've mentioned a lot of European schools over here. These are good options for you to consider. And schools will also be very open with you in terms of whether they feel that you would benefit more from their regular MBA, or whether you need to consider either an EMBA or a GEMBA. So have conversations with school. But I would say in your case, also be open to have conversations as to which format of their programs would work best for you. What is a low undergrad GPA? And when you mean 3 years of work ex, is it while you join the school or during? It's during the application process, number one. A low GPA would mean a couple of things. When you look at how your school or how your colleges evaluate your GPA, ideally you need to ensure that your GPA is at least 3 or above. Does that mean that if you're slightly below it, suppose you have a 2.8 or a 2.9, are you necessarily a bad candidate? It really means that you need to speak to the school and have those initial conversations where you can not only talk about your GPA, but you can also talk about what is it that you have done since school. A lot of times your undergrad GPA, you can also talk about things that you have done post school, which have enabled you to really, learn things which will be important in the context of a business education. So if you worked on things like a lot of, quant-based You have roles which require you to evaluate a lot of quantitative data. Whether you have taken a course after your undergrad where like maybe you've completed your CA or you've done a master's, a lot of those factors will also show the school that you are someone who's a lifelong learner. Your learning did not end, or your learning data points did not end with your undergrad GPA. So even if you have an undergrad GPA that is, say, below 3, you can still think about doing things before you apply to business school, which will indicate to them that you do have the kind of academic chops or to keep up with the pace of an MBA education. So it is important for you to look at bolstering your undergrad GPA, not just with a standardized test score, but also with indicators that would show the school that you have exposure to a lot of quantitative data, analytical, projects, or your contributions are analytical in nature, and also if you've done subsequent courses, which will help them understand that there is a commitment to learning. Another question, I know that the GMAT is not the only Indy criteria, but what is a good range of a GMAT focus edition that an Indian male from an engineering background working as a software developer can have if you have a, so your question is great because it kind of brings me to a point, okay? We have had plenty of applicants to M7 schools with a less than ideal score. Right now, yes, as an Indian male engineer, you might be an overrepresented applicant category. But does that mean that if you have a GMAT score that is not necessarily the 95th percentile, and by the way, if you are an Indian male software engineer, right now the focus edition would not have the kind of robust norms for us to kind of predict. Like with the old one, we would say, oh, you need to have like a 740 and above. But you do need to think about aiming for at least a 90 plus percentile on the score. But I would also say that, say you don't get it, okay? Should you kind of give up that dream? I would say no. If an M7 school is really on your radar and you're passionate about it, you need to think about bolstering your profile for the school. You need to be able to think about demonstrating your ability. We have enough success stories where individuals who have not hit a particular benchmark or not hit a particular GMAT score or a GRE score are still considered very, very seriously by those schools. So if you are thinking of a GMAT, and if that is right now your focus, then think about being at least at a 90 plus percentile. If you're at a 95 plus percentile, great for you. But does that guarantee admission? No, it doesn't. Because at the end of the day, your profile, what you've done so far, are going to be if at equal importance, if not more, for the school. So all the best with your preparation. But do remember that the thing that I would not want you to leave this webinar with is just being overwhelmed that if I don't hit that particular benchmark, will I need to give up on a particular M7 school dream? You would not. You would need to think about bolstering your profile as well. So with that, we seem to be done with questions. If you're thinking about your question and you've not asked, like I said, on the screen are the ways in which you can get in touch with us. In April, we will be doing a webinar where we speak to previous clients who have been alums at the top business schools in the world. And I would say that you should check, and you should definitely register for that if you are planning to apply in this year. Right now, we have a YouTube channel where we put up a lot of information. We also have a LinkedIn presence. You should follow us on both because we do put out information and a lot of updates, which will help you in your research as well as in your application journey. So with that, I think we've come to the end of this webinar. As always, it's been a real pleasure speaking with all of you. And again, do reach out to us if we can help you in any way. Before we leave, in the chat is a link for you to leave us a Google review based on the information that we've been circulating. And we take a lot of these means of gaining information from you very seriously. So please do take the time, take a minute to follow the link in the chat right now and provide us with your feedback on how you found this useful. If there's anything more that you feel that we can give you information on, we'd be glad to incorporate that into future webinars. So with that, I bid you adieu and I wish you all the best in your application journey.